Namaste and greetings. I, Sana Ansari, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi. Extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. Today we are gathered here for day 6 of Urban Policy and Local Governance Youth Fellowship, an online national autumn and winter school program, a 4-month online immersive introductory leadership certificate training fellowship program organized by IMPRI Center for Habitat Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. The chair for the program is Professor Manjula Bharathy, Professor at Center for Urban Policy and Governance, School of Habitat Studies, and Professor at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and also visiting Professor at IMPRI. The convenience for this course are Dr. Somadeep Chattopadhyay ji, Dr. Tidinkar Singh Pawar ji, Mr. Samar Ungele ji, Mr. Arvind Unni ji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources document in your email for your kind attention. We will be providing videos of each session for the flexible learning at your place and convenient time. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is encouraged that you join the meeting on time. There will be Q&A session after each presentation. Share your question in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. The question must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your question are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Without any further delay, to begin today's session, I would like to hand over to the chair, Professor Manjula Bharti ji, for her remarks about this extensive course. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining. Over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Thank you so much, IMPRI, for this interesting cohort, interesting urban policy, local governance youth fellowship. And today we are in the sixth, sixth lecture series. And today Dr. Taranaya will be discussing about urban policy and urban governance, looking from a perspective of migration. And we know that the past lectures, and we had interesting speakers coming and discussing about the democratic decentralization, the whole question of politics of marginalization, the importance of urban local governance planning, and the importance of looking the urban governance and then the water policy framework. Today, we will be looking at migration, which is an important challenge to the urban governance discourses, especially the migration policies, migration framework, and urban governance framework in the context of the increasing urbanization and urban sprawl are bringing in different kind of challenges to the urban platforms. So Dr. Taranaya will be discussing about the issues the migration is bringing to the urban governance and importance to revisit, redefine, and understand the migration perspectives when we are designing the urban policy governance, and the ways in which we need to rethink, redefine these migration policies from the perspective of social inequalities, inequities, and informal economy, which is very important, and how we are looking this kind of questions. So I welcome Dr. Taranaya to deliver the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for summarizing the ideas discussed within the course so comprehensively. Now, I would like to hand over to the first speaker of the day, Professor Tara Nair ji, Director for Research and Knowledge at the Center for Migration and Labor Solution, Ajivika Bureau, to conduct a session on the topic migration and urban governance. Thank you for joining today, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you, Professor Manjula. I hope I'm audible.
You are.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. Actually, I'm sorry. My laptop camera suddenly disappeared. I could not fix it, so I am actually using my phone to talk to you. I could have done a little sort of trick of using camera and laptop at the same time, but I thought I'll talk rather than talk through my PPT. Because it's anyway a sort of a discussion for about 40 minutes, I understand, maximum. So I thought I'll just be able to perhaps, put in front of you a few concerns and a few what do you call it, thoughts on urban governance and migration, urbanization, migration, urban development and migration, whichever way you try to kind of frame it, largely informed by the practice that organization, a part of the organization that I represent, has been trying to kind of intervene in Indian cities and also in the rural sort of sources. So I'll try to kind of bring examples and some sort of qualification to my little kind of points that I would like to take kind of place here. I think now migration is a fairly visible phenomenon thanks to the pandemic. And everybody is talking about migration, and everybody seems to be concerned about migration. And everybody is looking for data on migration, and people are really counting migrants and things like that. So I think till maybe 2018-19, this was not the case. And this was a largely unseen segment of India's working population. We knew they were, around, but nobody bothered about them. But the pandemic has visibilized that phenomenon to such an extent, such a dramatic extent, that at least now we know that millions of kind of men, women, and children, really move across this country in search of work. Migration could be for other reasons too, like for instance, if you know, demographers who look at migration per se would tell you that 85%, more than 85% of women in this country migrate due to marriage. Though even within that marriage, a lot of very exploitative labor arrangements are hidden, but we know that predominantly women migrate for reasons of marriage and men migrate for reasons of work, employment, etc., etc. But we were not even very clear about the magnitude of that phenomenon till very recently. Now, we have come to recognize that yes, 1 in every 7 individuals in this world either is an internal migrant or an international migrant. Migration is a key factor of urban growth. Migrants contribute significantly to building the cities all over the world. Migration is one of the largest and the most prominent driver of urbanization. And all of us are very eagerly looking forward to an urban future for everybody, including India. And of course, we now know that migration perhaps also makes Indian cities or cities all over the world more diverse. So these numerical the magnitude of migration and the diversity that migration brings to the urban spaces make the discussion on governance more exciting. How do you manage this? How are you managing or how are you going to manage these large numbers, these diverse populations, their very specific vulnerabilities, etc., etc. There's a fairly good recognition now that migrants have specific vulnerabilities in ordinary times, and of course, definitely in times of crisis. But if you really go through the narratives in general, and I think historically, if you really scan through the narratives about migration, it seems that migrant quote unquote, or a migrant worker quote unquote, has always been viewed as a kind of a a homogeneous class of outsiders. At least in certain cases, they are seen as disruptors of local culture, which seems very much sort of embedded within the socio-spatial sort of context and things like that. So migrants create some sort of a disruption in that space, and hence A very good part of the migration literature also talks about how we can stop maybe migration, how to make rural areas more, because rural urban migration is the most classic kind of a migration, and it is also the most predominant form of migration. So how to stop migration? Okay, let's really kind of, come out with programs, employment generation programs, employment guarantee programs in the countryside so that migration can be arrested, etc. So there are multiple kind of sort of, what do you call it, thinking and imagination around migration. If you scan through the policy, whatever little policy has been formulated with migrants in perspective. Very recently, that we have really started looking at migrants or migrant workers as agents of change. They can also, remake urban spaces, urban cultures, urban societies, and hence they're also proactive sort of, contributors and participants in the urban development process. So that's a very interesting class of literature which is coming up, by urban geographers, urban scholars, otherwise, in some of these kind of very critical urban planners. That's a community which really sort of, look at migration as a phenomenon which has transformation sort of potential. If you really look at globally, we may find, especially in the 1920s, the beginning of this decade, we realized that there are several, 2016 onwards, let's say 2015-16 onwards, several global framework, global guidelines have come up in terms of, discussing migration and its, and the need to integrate kind of a commitment to make migration more inclusive, more resilient, and a commitment to make planning and designing of urban spaces more inclusive by also addressing migrants' concerns. So we talked about, we know that there's a global compact on migration. UN has come out with several rounds of, high-powered committee discussions, certain instrumentalities, certain arrangements. There are certain migration guidelines and things like that. So international migration scene is very active. With very relevant international organizations, like, for instance, the International Organization of Migration, IOM, kind of an institution, also spearheading, sometimes steering, sometimes supporting this kind of knowledge generation around international migration. And of course, it's much larger political sort of a fight, like across the border migration, international migration, and all that. One doesn't perhaps see that sort of an attention to internal migration dynamics. Now we are terribly interested in counting migrants. Most of these initiatives which are going on right now in India are largely in the enumeration space. Can we register migrant workers? Can we sort of, enumerate them properly? Can we create some sort of a registry to kind of enter the details at the panchayat level, at some other local government level? So a lot of discussions are going on in the enumeration space. But beyond that, we really know very little about the livelihoods of migration, the struggles of the livelihoods of migrant workers, the struggles of migrants, the inequities, which are very deeply sort of, embedded within the class, caste, gender divide that our society otherwise is characterized by, and things like that. So there are phenomenal, very, very seminal work on informal sector workers, footloose workers, and all that. Within that, there is a migration discourse. But still, I think precious little is done in terms of understanding the real nuances of migration. And that's where we need to really think whether we need to reflect whether we do have actually a governance framework. And if you have, what is it? If you really do not have what kind of a governance framework we must necessarily have. It's very clear that migrant workers do face certain significant and distinct vulnerabilities anywhere in the world. be it an internal migration scenario or an international migration scenario. That could come from challenges like the, like the, unfamiliarity with the language, unfamiliarity with the culture, or simple isolation, lack of access to certain facilities, and of course, all the sort of, cultural, social, sort of economic constraints that, workers in this country are, informal workers in this country are made to face. That, we are very proud of the fact that, our workers are very resilient and migrants are very resilient and they are very resourceful, etc., etc. But some of these barriers, like their mobility restrictions, their sort of, their inability to access certain services because identity documents are often missing, stolen. We have seen all these cases. They have no social networks or very limited social networks at the destination, and attacks, discrimination, all these things, all these sort of challenges are routinely faced by our migrant workers who are working largely under informal work arrangements. So the impact of all these are necessarily felt at the local level. Maybe you talk about migration at a very global, as part of a global discourse, but the impact of some of these experiences and these processes are very starkly felt at the local level, which means management of these challenges and the management of the diversity that we are talking about, and the and some of these deficits that we are talking about must be dealt at the local level. So the question would be how that is done and how the local administration can can perhaps steer through that sort of a challenge. They are anyway stressed by several other things, like there are struggles of generating resources for the city, planning the city, the issues of land, revenue arrangements, housing shortage, umpteen number of other urban struggles are already on, as far as a large number of our urban local bodies are concerned. So along with that, how do we really incorporate or include, or rather integrate? Inclusion is much later. They can integrate migrant workers within that scheme. I have at this point in time, I must tell you that when I say that, when I by virtue of the kind of work that I do, when I say a migrant, I predominantly think about the migrant worker, because I think work is one of the critical linkages that that lies between migration and development, urban development in India. That is at the core of that link. It is at the core of the rural-urban continuum that you're talking about, the rural-urban linkages that we are talking about. So I'm actually talking about a migrant worker, who is largely employed in the industrial clusters in India, industrial cities in India, but predominantly under informal work arrangements. When I say informal work arrangements, I mean that these workers are recruited through kinship routes, largely by informal, undocumented, irregular agents, who are also known as labor contractors, sardars, several names they have. They are the ones who bring these workers into the cities, and the worker and the employer really do not have any great connection between them. The employer is a very remote figure, emotionally and very often physically, and the entire transaction between the worker and work is mediated by this agent or the contractor, labor contractor, who often is from the same village, from the same caste, or from a slightly dominant caste in the village, but there is some sort of a kinship or familiarity kind of relationship between these workers. And many of the workers are largely agrarian workers. They have been, they really go between the urban and the rural settings very often, periodically. They work in factories, but they also go back to their villages. either during certain kinds of economic activities like during farming season, or they need to just simply recuperate, rejuvenate themselves, regenerate themselves. Clusters like what we see in the industrial clusters that in India, like Surat, for instance, where about unofficially we know that about 600,000 Uriya workers are employed by the power loom sector, and of course, if you add those who are also employed in the diamond cutting sector, the numbers would be very, very high. And there are 600,000 Oriya migrant workers in the city of Surat across multiple sectors, and power loom definitely employs most of them. And that power loom is I don't know whether you have seen a loom factory. It's a very noisy sort of a factory. Hundreds of looms are making a very, very sort of, loud kind of noise together all the time, much beyond the normal kind of decibel of sound that a normal human being can tolerate without getting sort of hearing impaired. So they're constantly exposed to that. Then their blood pressure, their hearing, everything kind of goes for a toss. So they need to go back after 6 or 4 or 5 months back to village so that they can simply regenerate themselves. Their social, their labor power. So the rural areas are essentially the social reproduction sites too. So the urban, what I'm trying to say is that the typical Indian, labor migration scenario, the urban factories do not take the responsibility of social reproduction at all. That is externalized, and that is actually sent back to the village. So that's why we say that there's a kind of a dual existence for the worker. Production happens here, but the social reproduction happens elsewhere. So the connection with the rural area, connection with the home village never can be snapped, because that's where that precious function sort of gets done. So this is the nature of interaction between the urban and the rural in a very typical urban industrial workforce scenario in India. And this is Surat is the example that I've given you. If you go to Jodhpur, Balotra, where steel rerouting mills are in smaller units, are in large numbers, or you just go to Kherani Nagar in Mumbai, where smaller workshops are run, or any other part of Maharashtra, Bombay, where this kind of industrial clustering it's done. Rabale, where the chemical factories are largely sort of clustered, etc., etc. You find this sort of a relationship. There is no employer-employee relationship. The contractor mediates everything. Social reproduction is not the responsibility of the people, including housing. The employers very often accommodate the workers in the factory, within the factory site. People, you will find them sleeping in and around huge machines, dangerous burners, and and all sorts of things. So this is the overall framework within which we see migration happening. What is the role of then? How do we govern the system, and who governs the system? When you look at the governance frameworks or governance arrangements that we have, we know that there is labor department. There are other government departments. Labor department predominantly is responsible for workers. Then, of course, there are umpteen number of other departments, like, there is something which looks at accidents and injuries and, things like that. There are other kinds of, government departments which look at kind of maybe safety of boilers, factory inspectors, because all those factors which come into the Factories Act, an inspector can come and check and all that. Despite all these kind of paraphernalia, informal work settings are deeply and very, very seriously insecure. And those informal work settings are dominated by migrant workers who come from some of the poorest regions in India, and coming from some of the poorest agrarian families in India. They are not skilled, but they are made to sit at machines which need sophisticated kind of maybe sophisticated skill sets. They end up kind of cutting their fingers and hands and losing their limbs and maybe sometimes losing their lives. But we don't really we have no mechanism to properly document those things. We really do not know whether they get their compensation properly. We really, a large section of the workforce in India are not eligible for Provident Fund and ESI entitlements. Even if they're entitled, they may not get it. And right now, as we speak, the minimum workday is very, very craftily extended to 12 hours a day. The minimum wage notifications in many states have very silently increased the 8-hour norm to 12 hours. People are working round the clock without break. Like all these, violations of human and social rights are happening within the industrial setting that that we are talking about. And of course, a very important part of, or a very major part of this deficit is the wage theft. That is what the workers lose, but from what they are rightfully, what is rightfully due to them. I'm talking about this also from the kind of data we produce. We run a helpline, labor helpline, which became more popular during the pandemic. And, workers can phone into this helpline and report their grievances. And there is a huge team of legal actors who mediate more often or most often out of court. And if that fails, even through labor court, complaints about all kinds of things. And 95% of the complaints are essentially of wage theft. They have not got, they worked, but they did not get their money back. So I'm saying all these things because if I really look at migration, urban development, or migration within in urban India, what really most strikingly comes in front of me is the face of an informal worker in Indian cities, and what regulates and what governs that worker. I cannot really see great frameworks to do that, which does that sort of a thing, because labor laws wouldn't apply to these units since they do not consider themselves to be factories. There are umpteen ways in which owners can split their enterprises into multiple smaller units and escape the regulatory gaze. So they'd remain an unregistered factory, and hence they can really sort of, gloss over labor violations or the supervision from labor inspectors and things like that. Very few magnanimous, benevolent entrepreneurs who work with us come forward to say that, okay, we would like to kind of, install a safety device in the factory to reduce accidents, etc., etc. But very few, very, very few. So largely governance or supervision or regulation actually has been now vested in the private hands. You cannot see the state anywhere. The labor, that's because we have not yet recognized that the organized workforce in India is less than 10%. And 90% of the workforce in India is unorganized, kind of, informal and invisible. And there is nothing that can protect them. And there are no unions. So I think this kind of a privatization or a kind of pushing regulation or supervision to the private realm, either on the worker or on the employer, has definitely vitiated the urban development also to a large extent. You can see that if you do not really have a place to stay, the factories wouldn't provide housing to you, and you do not have affordable rental housings in the city, then you start squatting in the open. There is no other way. Municipality is worried about it because they know that, oh, that's where the crimes happen, and that's where the filth happens, and that's where, of course, it's not very inhuman to see such sites and things like that. So squalor, slums, this kind of squatting sites and things like that come up. That's just because the city cannot and doesn't know how to accommodate these migrant workers who constantly flow into the city to build the city. You know, the tallest building in the city is not going to come up unless these workers really squat in the open space. But you know that land is an extremely sort of valuable asset in the neoliberal sort of imagination. Land has only one value, that's the commercial value. So I think the municipalities are definitely, though there is a rental housing scheme, etc., announced, but very few initiatives have come up in India where municipalities have come up and started doing something for the migrants. And I think Kerala is an exception. We always talk about Kerala. Kerala has Sapnagar scheme. And I think we should not perhaps, it's an absolutely exceptional case in many other cases, even in the case of, managing and regulating and governing migrant issues. So that is one issue. Housing, I really want to come to housing as a great governance crisis, and which has been created by the lack of inclusivity of the cities and lack of inclusivity of the urban planning processes. Large number of other issues we need to talk about: political participation of workers, these workers. We know that, now you talk about, like voting rights for them and all that. Our organization also has done some advocacy there. Migrant workers should really have the right to vote, even if they are away from their, their villages. And we have seen in Bombay, etc., like large parties, powerful and rich parties sending buses to Bombay to pick up people during the UP local election and things like that. Those things happen, but that's not the kind of participation that we are talking about. Access to amenities, any of the basic amenities. Water, drinking water is a huge crisis for, migrant workers who are either in squatter settlements or in construction sites, or in factories, wherever they work. Potable water is a big issue. Children, great casualty. Can see that children who have not been able to go to school because both the parents are working, maybe both of them are working in the boilers. And let me also tell you that the mother is working without any wage. So mother is part of the Jodi. So the mother goes and helps a father but doesn't earn anything. Children are really loitering around 3 years, 4 year olds, etc. No creche facility, nothing like a school admission, no migrant friendly sort of educational arrangements. Very few, maybe you find one for the agaria workers, the salt kind of pan workers in Kutch perhaps, but very, very few like that. So these are all hugely sort of, challenging governance issues for, I would say it's a challenging governance issue for the local government because they are not able to find any solution for this, because there is intense competition for the resources, urban resources, that is largely land. And for the workers, it restricts their human development, their own development, their life quality, and their ability to kind of, live a life of dignity, everything. And constantly kind of deprived of basic, decent sort of, living rights, and human rights and social rights and labor rights. And that is what maybe currently migration has really given to most of the working class kind of people in India. I'm not talking about the more fortunate. Obviously, that's good, pretty obvious, and all of us are migrants in that sense. But we perhaps are not. We do not fall in this this kind of a discussion anyway. So your rights are protected. You are maybe in an organized sector, and like things like that. But it's an absolute minority, that kind of sort of migration. So as I said, after the pandemic, it looks as if a lot of emphasis on migrants, we started really talking about everywhere. All conferences in India right now has a panel on migration or a paper on migration. So that's the visibility of migration now. Many state governments have come out with certain dedicated programs, and I said that Kerala is a case study. I'm not talking about it. Surat, for instance, in Gujarat, it has actually kind of it has it's a very distinct division, because Gujarat has enormous population of migrant workers, large population of migrant workers. They started a facilitation center. They started an exercise to enumerate, kind of build up statistics, and they have sort of the facilitation center is something which through they can link workers to entitlements and national schemes, welfare schemes, and things like that. But to me, none of this, philosophically aligned to an inclusive city building agenda. Very good, must be done. They must be really linked to, government schemes and PMAY and whatnot, housing and, Swasthya Abhiyans and stuff like that. It's very important. But an inclusive city where migrants are sort of, seen as the builders of its urban future needs to be a governance framework which very clearly talks about levels, sectors, and actors of governance. There are certain guidelines at national level, which gets sort of, percolated down to the state level, and then it comes to the local level. So local governments remain simple implementers of certain action sort of agenda at the what do you call it, top top layers of governance. But there is nothing more than that. So it becomes a very mechanical implementation of certain kinds of jargons and certain kinds of sort of, what do you call it, agenda and things like that. So some of the more critical and currently important concerns, and for instance, climate change. Again, that has become maybe a buzzword, but I think climate change is something in a migrant scenario is something which one needs to look at, because if what I describe as the conditions under which migrant workers survive in a city, we can imagine the cities that are heating up, the cities that are overcrowded, cities that are exclusionary in many ways. How are they going to kind of impact the kind of life quality of migrant workers in future? And we talk about sustainable cities, but personally, my fear is that when the cities become sustainable and the city designs become more sustainable, my fear is that maybe the migrants would get pushed to the periphery. It's started happening. Many of the industrial clusters have now started moving to the peripheries where governance is more shady. You really do not know who is governing whom. So some of these conflicting developments in the current kind of vocabulary that we are using, like resilient, sustainable cities, how those governance arrangements are going to pan out as far as migrants are concerned is something which we need to seriously consider and come out with appropriate governance frameworks. I'm saying all this because I personally do not think migration in India has a reasonable governance framework to talk about. We have a set of laws, a set of sort of regulations that are supposed to regulate sites like industrial production or housing or land, but we really do not have a kind of an inclusive mechanism which really proactively integrates migrant workers or migrants, especially migrants who are of this nature, who are perhaps not completely settled, who are seasonal, cyclical migrants, but who play a very significant role in the city's growth. We do not seem to have a constructive governance framework to look at it. So I stop here. Anything else? And if anything else I need to say, I presume there would be questions or comments. Then I'll try to address.
Thank you, ma'am, for an extremely insightful talk. I'm sure that the participant must have gained valuable insight from this session. Now I would like to welcome Chair for her kind remarks on this session.
Thank you, Dr. Thara. And we're sure that, like this interesting session where Dr. Thara was speaking about, engaging. It is important to engage with the historicity of the cities and to migration to understand and unravel the urbanization narrative. She started with that. And she also started the importance to deconstruct the monolithic and homogeneous character of migrants, because usually when we are speaking about migrants, it is usually taking as a monogeneous, monolithic ways, and it is important to understand the diversity ingrained in the migrants, like a seasonal migrant, temporary migrant, or a permanent migrant. So it is important to understand that. And also this whole question, when we are trying to understand the migrants, it is important to look at the placemaking narrative of migrant, their emplacement, displacement, the way in which socially, culturally, politically they emplace, and at the parallelly they get emplaced and displaced with the surroundings, with the socio-cultural, political spaces, and the challenges, administrative, and then the social challenges that has been given by that. And then she was also speaking about the importance of understanding an inclusive governance when you're trying to look at the migrants, and especially from the framework of migrants working in an informal economy. And then she was also saying about the intersectional vulnerabilities of migrants and how it is important to look at, and then the way in which this impacts at the local level, because for this cohort it is important because we are trying to understand the urban local governance and how the question of migrants is important for the local governance and its administrative functionaries to look at the challenges posed by the migrants in its emplacement and displacement perspective. And she was trying to give an example from an industrial cluster that is speaking from an informal economic framework, and where she was speaking very interestingly from a production, social reproduction side to understand the dichotomy between the urban and the rural spaces. And she was also very importantly, as students, like that it is participant, it is important to look at the proactive absence of a regulatory framework in for looking this migrant issue, and then the governance framework. And it is important to see, especially with the large number of migrants who are becoming a building block to the cities, and how a proactive absence of a proactive regulatory governance is important. And it is important to look from that. And then because some of you are also looking at in the neoliberal economy, how the state is the best state that governs the least, and the withdrawal of the state from the sector, and then they've been pushed to the private sectors, how it is important to look that thing. And then the more importantly, like as students and participants, how the design of the city, the violence, we always speak about violence in the city, but violence of the city, it is also important by the design, by the architecture, the right to the cities, like Lefebvre was saying about, we are speaking about right to cities. Who have the right to cities? Who are excluded? Why they excluded? The process of exclusion. And where are this migrants coming in this picture, and why, like she was also speaking about the ways in which they have been dispossessed. So when you having the privatization, you have the smart cities, and when you have the accumulations of capital, and how the dispossession of due to this accumulations, and who are getting dispossessed due to the accumulation, the people who are belonging to the lower socioeconomic rungs are being dispossessed, like Harvey was saying about, dispossession of accumulation, how migrants are actually being part of this. And then who have the right to cities, and where she's speaking about, to understand it from a three-dimensional perspective, like what is the level, what is the sector, and what is the actors, who are the actors in that, and trying to understand from that perspective. And it is important to see from this multiple ways of vulnerabilities, marginalizations, and peripheries that has been constructed and created because of the gentrification that is happening in the cities, because of the beautification that is happening in the cities, because of the way in which, cities are becoming smart, and in becoming smart, who are becoming less smart, and why they are less smart, and what is the role of the state, and how violent we are to make these things beautiful and smart, and who are getting dispossessed and displaced in that endeavor is something that we need to see. And that is very important to see this production of the marginals and the way in which the marginals has been there and how we are hegemonizing and naturalizing these marginal spaces in the pursuit of making beautiful smart cities, and what is the place of migrants who makes it cities beautiful and smart. So that is a very interesting thing where we have to look it from a political, economic, cultural perspectives, and Tara Nair's lecture actually throw light into this multiple perspectives, which is very important to look the cities. So I really invite questions from the participants, and then it is your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to open the floor for Q&A session. Participant can either raise their hand or type their question in the Q&A box or chat box.
Please go ahead. In the meanwhile, we can take the question from the Q&A box. Meenu ji, would you like to unmute and ask the question yourself?
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the talk, Professor. I just wanted to ask, what would an inclusive framework for migrants in India look like? And what would an inclusive governance framework look like? And what factors need utmost consideration?
You want me to answer together or one by one? If anybody else has any questions.
Ma'am, we can do one by one. This is the first question that we have.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, can I have a question?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So basically, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation that you have given, Professor Tara Madam. So actually, my topic of this fellowship is about neoliberal policies in housing sector in India. And I've done a little bit of research on this, but what I would like to know is that whether due to migration, whatever conditions that are there in cities, is it a system failure or is it a policy failure?
Shall I go ahead with what I yeah. I think it's actually the first question is quite an interesting question. Like, it's very easy for us to say that, okay, everything is wrong and, nothing is inclusive and all that. But I think we also have a responsibility to then spell out what do we mean by an inclusive framework. In my view, I think different people may think very differently on it. And because inclusion itself is a very congested term, or inclusion itself is a very discursive in that sense, but the way in which I understand inclusion as a sociological phenomenon, I think a governance arrangement becomes very inclusive, especially in the case of the migrant worker sort of a context, when it is able to make the migrant worker or the migrant in the city a participant in the local development processes, yet enable that person to continue to be, because that is what rural urban migration is all about. Yet enable that person to be you know, kind of a participant in the processes, you know, where he or she would like to go back to. So she's not a stranger to the city. She's not an intruder into the city, and she's not someone who is displaced from the village. So it is extremely important to understand that migration is a very distinct livelihood strategy, which involves this movement. You know, here is a person who is able to inhabit two spaces, and that person should not lose the right to citizenship because that person got out of one setting and got into another setting. After a temporary stint, that person may go back to the old setting. So that's that process of dynamism, that process of dynamic movement and mobility must be recognized by any policy which looks at it. So we talk about you know, one nation, one ration card. We think that's going to, the portability of the ration card is going to give that sort of dual existence of a person. So that's why a lot of migration activists actually supported that move if it happens. But the point is that actually maybe that is our next question in some ways talking about. But our systems are so sort of, you know, so deeply sort of, you know, frayed, you know, at the core and the center, that it will not allow such you know, such a system to efficiently function. Could be corruption, it could be official apathy, you know, a whole lot of things. It's simple disregard for a poor person. We know that. You know, if you go to a bank, you talk about financial inclusion, but if you go to a bank, the poor pensioner who has a Jan Dhan account will have to sit outside, you know, the bank branch, where you and me bank in the bank branch under the cold waves of the you know, the cooler or the AC. So this is the reality of India, what reality of inclusion. So that is an inclusive kind of governance framework for me. It's a highly integrated. I'm not talking about a unified sort of a thing, but it's a highly integrated sectorally in terms of levels and actors governance framework, which recognizes the existence of recognizes migration as a process wherein the citizen inhabits two spaces as a livelihood strategy. I don't know whether you know, you agree to that, but this is exactly what I mean by an inclusive framework. You know, I think you can expand it further to say that how each institution then needs to respond to this, you know, beyond the social, cultural, economic integration. We can really work out this sort of, you know, we can work out the details of a policy philosophy of this nature and see what kind of integration do we need. Labor department and land department and, you know, revenue department and maybe, you know, some other department, which social welfare department and, you know, like all, including transport and, you know, like a whole lot of actors are then involved within that. But the system perhaps wouldn't allow us to. So that, you know, come to the specific question of housing, I think it is both a policy kind of failure and a system failure. It is definitely a policy failure because there is a policy vacuum. We have we have policy intentions of this, isn't it? You know, if you look at PMAY guidelines or the housing guidelines which come, we talk about rental housing, affordable rental housing, and things like that. But we have not been able to implement that because the system does not have neither the capability nor the knowledge nor the wisdom. You know, the municipal corporation, you know, whoever is sitting in the municipal corporation offices may not even understand the language that we are now talking about, the theft and the, you know, deficit and the violation and all that. So for that person, it is, you know, like if you just look at any of the urban disaster management plans and whatever, it's essentially a count of buildings. How many buildings can we construct? How many nallas can we construct? You know, like it's essentially a contractor's document. It is not a human document, and it's not a document which aims at you know, what do you call it, improving human lives. It's essentially structures kaise khada kiya jata hai. like how we can. So I think that's a fundamental game-changing thought. That's why we think that advocacy is important, and we need to keep talking about it, and we need to keep writing about it. We need to really make planners and urban researchers who are humanistic, who are able to understand that part of it, going beyond the structural sort of part of it, to write more about it, create noise about it. Happening. We are actually having a very affordable rental housing scheme, a model housing scheme in Surat, after rounds and rounds of discussion and debates and things like that, where we have created, when I say the NGO called Ajivika Bureau, I work at a place called Work Fair and Free Foundation, which is an exclusive research organization, but we derive our practice sort of wisdom from Ajivika Bureau. Ajivika Bureau currently runs worker hostel in Surat, which is a model hostel, which has been designed by these kinds of architects, who are more of social architects, if we can call it that way. So there are about 85 people who are accommodated there. We are also trying simultaneously thinking of telling the municipality, will you really, there are several apartment blocks which have been low income apartment blocks where built and is guarded, they're just remaining vacant. We are just sort of trying to say that, if we can bring in maybe some amount of private equity, can you think about a kind of a tripartite management arrangement where the municipal corporation and some private investor and a kind of civil society organization can come together and, run such things. So these are all long fights, very strategic fights. So it's both a policy failure, a policy gap, and a huge system failure.
We have
Thank you,
one
ma'am.
more question.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have one more question in the chat box by Sonam ji. Sonam ji, would you like to please unmute yourself and ask the question? I can read it. So, ma'am, the question says that as we see that Mumbai is a worker city, and in Mumbai we can see there's a clear difference between slum and non-slum areas, as most of the residents are migrants and most of them are in informal work sector, including the women and youth. Why in other cities like Delhi and Bangalore, it's irrelevant, and also how policies can be modified and updated so that documentation of migrants will be addressed. This is the question by Sonam ji.
I hope I have understood it. Maybe I should go to the chat box and have a look at that question once. Worker city in Mumbai, we can see the clear difference between slum and non-slum areas. Okay, as most of the residents are migrants and most of them are in formal work sectors, including women and youth. Why in other cities like Delhi, Bangalore, it's relevant. Also, how policies can be modified. Immigration of migrants would be addressed. Are you, hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you see me?
No, ma'am.
I think I have sort of gone away. Sorry. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. I just did not understand your question properly, I think, but let me reiterate that. You're trying to say that in Mumbai, point number 1 that you make is that Mumbai is a worker city. So there is a clear distinction between slums and non-slums. Is it so? Hello? Is Sonam around?
Sonam ji.
No, I think my point is that in these cities that Sonam perhaps is talking about in Bangalore, etc., I don't know what makes us say that there is no distinction between slums and non-slums. You perhaps should go to Bangalore to see that. How slums have come up in the, I still believe that I understood the question. So, I'm trying to interpret that question. So even in cities like Karnataka, where migration has picked up actually in the 2000s and later, mostly in the new sectors, largely garments, and of course now a lot of service sectors like this what do you call it, hail taxis and e-commerce, like pickup stuff and things like that. New slums have come up in the periphery, and those slums are organized on caste lines, community lines, region lines, and things like that. So you see those neighborhoods and neighborhoods of social cohesion identification have definitely come up. Bombay is, as maybe I am veering a little bit, but what I want to say is that Bombay has definitely a very different dynamics, and even our own work, we find that a lot of movement within these neighborhoods one could see, even in terms of action, even in terms of economic sort of a kind of an economic dynamism, a participation in workforce, income flows, everything. So a lot of actions were really possible within the Mumbai slums, is what I understand. I work in a Pune with a Pune organization, based organization, who run creches in the slum neighborhoods, and I'm quite amazed at the way in which they are able to organize their work, which I don't think would have happened perhaps in a city in Ahmedabad, city like Ahmedabad. I'm not very sure about it. So that is one part of the story. I think if Sonam is there, she can tell me where I went wrong in this question. Because the second part of the question I just couldn't decipher. If anybody can explain it to me, I perhaps would be able to better answer that.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I was not able to unmute earlier.
Oh.
I wanted to understand. So the migrants who want to take advantage of any government scheme, but due to lack of documentation, they are not able to take the advantage. So, is there
I know.
policy changes, possibilities, or anything? Yeah, I wanted to understand.
And I think that is true of everywhere actually, Sonam. But one thing which strikes me very much in Bombay and Pune is that organizations are willing to forego these documents. The organizations are not insisting. I think private organizations are also willing to, and there are umpteen number of such organizations, even cooperatives, who are telling these inhabitants that it doesn't matter. We know that, like you really do not have a patta for the land, etc. But I know that you have been staying here for 20 years and we'll extend you a loan. But in cities where the migrant history is shorter and newer migration pathways have come up, this is not going to happen. Because the city has not really become very familiar with these migrant flows or this set of these migrant communities. But there are certain pockets you suddenly see, like in Ahmedabad, there is a huge neighborhood where people from UP and Bihar have come up and settled down. We call them semi-settled migrants, and they have their houses. The lands have no patta, but they have come up to their houses because of their long historical presence in that land. There is some sort of an understanding between maybe the ward member, like the political leaders and the political structures and the migrant workers, because ultimately that negotiation is very important. Where do you figure within the political machinations of that space? And if you're able to make a dent there, maybe in terms of your vote or in terms of your whatever, many of them have Aadhaar cards with that address, or something, in that sense. Or even if they don't have a proper title over their land, maybe they're able to get support from the state and things like that. So I think that political integration and political capacity to politically manipulate the system also is very important. Bombay perhaps is also one site which has been able to where communities have been able to, because there is a lot of internal migrants also within in Mumbai, like Indra, Maharashtra migrant workers, not UP and Bihar. They are still maybe, their own settlement. So I think we need to understand that phenomenon a little further. Which of these, neighborhoods people are able to make the dent, and which of the neighborhoods people are not able to make the dent. So my hunch is that may not be very uniformly so. You may find interesting differences between the communities which are able to make that conversation or negotiation, and communities which are not able to make that negotiation about titles, rights, etc., etc.
Sonam, one more thing, is that right now we have done a study right now with Mumbai Citizen Forum, and maybe the first time we have done a study with 237 electoral wards in Mumbai. With a very detailed sample, and then that study results are coming out, where we are trying to understand the citizen participation in various issues and their social media engagement and their engagement with the corporators and the way in which they participate in the elections, in the multiple elections, Lok Sabha election, assembly elections, and also in the local elections,
Right.
and how it is changing. And then the way in which they are responding with the governance issues and their social networking. Institutional networking. And we are coming out with this study, and by maybe within 1 or 2 months, the study will come out. We will be having the press conference soon on that. So this will give light to some of these issues. Very interestingly, we are also looking from a slum, non-slum kind of duality also with this across this 237 electoral wards.
Right.
It gives very interesting, like all these questions of different schemes and services. We are looking at, like something about 67 questions and a focus group discussion. So it is coming out, it will come out now. Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think so, ma'am. No one has any more questions. So thank you, ma'am. It was pleasure listening to you. Now,
Thanks so much.
I'm delighted to invite Professor K.N. Harilaji.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much, Dr. Tara Nair, for taking your time and being here. Thank you so much.
That's what mine. Thank you.
Professor Harilaji is a former member of the Kerala State Planning Board, a former professor at the Center for Development Study, affiliated with JNU. Currently serves as a chairperson for the 7th State Finance Commission, the Government of Kerala. So will be guiding us on the topic rethinking local urban governance. A very warm welcome, and over to you, sir.
Dr. Harlal is joined.
Ma'am, I think he hasn't joined yet.
He is not joined, right?
No, ma'am, no. Not as of yet.
So we can take this time to discuss about some of this dissertations or the research articles of the students, because last time I could not discuss with one of the student, and I can discuss that, and by the time you join.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you please also ask Priyanka to contact Dr. Harilan and see when he will be joining? He said that he'll be joining at 7. He had a meeting. He said that he'll be joining.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, I only have the email contact. I do not have the number.
Just give me 1 minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Meanwhile, if any of the participants want to discuss anything pertaining to their project with Professor Manjula Bharathy ji, you are free to discuss.
I spoke with him. There is some again confusion regarding that, and he will join within 15 minutes time. And by that time, we can discuss with the students, participants. Some of the participants could not discuss with me their research topic last time, and also any students, any participants who have gone further in that, and we can give,
Yes,
more
ma'am.
info into that. And can you also send me the link? One second, can I'll send the link again to Dr. Harilal. And is the link has been sent to his mail?
Yes, ma'am. You can also share, ma'am, your panelist link also, or I can share with you mine link also. Any link will work. I'll just share my link with you, ma'am.
In my WhatsApp, so I can just send it. Do you have my WhatsApp, right?
Yes, ma'am, yes. Ma'am, I've just sent you.
Yeah. So can we take the time to discuss?
Yes, ma'am. I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
Adarsh ji is
Any
ready.
participants would like to discuss more?
Ma'am,
I
we
see
have
Adarsh ji's hand raised. Adarsh ji,
Yeah.
please go ahead. And also, I would like to request, Vipin ji has recently submitted his abstract. He had not previously submitted by the
So
last
can
session.
you speak about it, Vipin?
Yes.
Who is it? The person who
Yes,
has
ma'am.
not. So
Yes,
can
Vipin
he
ji.
discuss
Yes.
about it? Yeah. Can the person discuss about this abstract first?
Good evening, madam. I'm Vipin here. I'm audible?
You are audible.
yes.
Can you take the slides off, Priyanka?
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
Avi, please stop sharing the screen.
So I can see the participant more.
Just a minute, madam.
Urban Policy Local Governance Youth Fellowship slide, no? If you can take that off. Stop sharing that. Yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Actually, I have chosen my
Can you be a little louder? I'm not able to hear you properly.
just. Actually, I have chosen my subject for research is the air quality policy and its implementation in Chandrapur city area. With its impact, what the measures have been taken by administration and stakeholder for improving air quality in Chandrapur city.
Improving the
Air quality.
Yeah.
So it's measures impact and assessment of that impact. Also, I want to study the what can be more done in this air quality management, air quality improvement. So I have that this subject for my research paper.
Okay. So, and your study area is?
My study area is Chandrapur city.
Chandrapur. So when you are trying to look, basically from, you can see that you can try to look at that from an urban and a climate change context, because you are trying to look at, like how the air quality is been changing in a space where are you trying to look it from when you're trying to see that air quality, are you trying to look it from a demand side or a supply side, or are you trying to look it, from a mitigation perspective or an adaptation perspective?
Actually, I am looking from mitigation perspective.
Yeah, you're looking from a mitigation perspective,
Yeah.
right? So mitigation perspective, what should be the role of the planners and then the urban designers should do to, like, you are trying to look at the carbon footprint or, the vehicles, how you're trying to look that air pollution, in what way you're trying to look at the air pollution, for example, in Delhi, the air pollution may be also one of the reasons of the fossil burning or because of the crackers burning, something, that you can have multiple reasons. But here, what are the kind of reasons and then the way in which any former studies, lot of studies might have happened there. So former studies based on that and how the mitigation interventions is not effective, why the mitigation interventions is not effective, and what could be done right now to improve the mitigation intervention so that the air quality could be improved. And who are the people? And then since you also have a primary data collection, we can also see that who are the people who have been most affected, the worst affected people because of this air pollution. And what are their issues? And is the planners or the city is doing something to address their health issues because of this air pollution? So this could be something that you can take from as a primary survey. That is my suggestion. But do you have any other suggestions in your mind to do the primary collection, data collection?
Actually, I have taken support from air quality data from CPCB and MPCB. Also from just like government has launched a national clean air program. On that side, also we have some data available regarding air quality. Also, there is a SEPI action plan in this area, in Chandrapur's surrounding area. Maharashtra Pollution Control Board has designed a SEPI action plan. From last 10 years, they are working on it. So we have that data and with some action point also. So I will study that also. Year-wise report of air quality information. Also, health study report I have with me that has been designed by a civil surgeon of this area. Action plan for control of air quality that has been designed by municipal corporation and they are working on it. So I will also study it. Also air quality index analytics from Indian cities that from 2015 to 2023, that data I have. I will study all this data and also some measures taken by stakeholders regarding that that may be municipal corporation. We have thermal power plant here. What the measures have been that taken? We have minings here, WCL wet and coal field. I will study what the measures have been taken by them from transport department, from other that all inclusive stakeholders. What the measures they should have to take, or what the measures they have taken. I will study all it.
But still then, like whatever you're saying right now, you're looking at the secondary data and coming out, you're saying that the corporation is coming out with a plan for a mitigation interventions of an inequality thing. And also there is some statistics and then the data that is coming out on the air quality that is there from the from using a historical mapping or a historical thing. But all these things are secondary data, right? And what is your plan to take? Are you planning to take some primary data collection also? And if so, on what dimension that you would be taking the primary data collection?
Actually, such a primary collection, I don't think on it. But if there anything needed, I can do it.
Yeah, see, because like my suggestion is that you are saying about air quality and deterioration of the air quality, and then you can really look at like, see, you are saying that you have the statistics and the data, and who are the people who have been most affected by the air pollution, and then if you can have some group, like if a intersectional framework, is this the women or is the elderly people, and is this who are the people who have been affected, and then if you can take a primary data. Engaging with them, then you will see that, okay, what will be the measures and the modes adopted by the corporations to address their health issue or as a development issue itself, and how they are planning to address and take this challenge forward. So that could be an interesting way to see, in the mitigation phase of the corporation.
To collect this data, I should have to prepare a form, a questionnaire form for that, so that I can
Yeah.
collect it.
So you can have, you can have multiple ways, you can have a case study analysis, you can have a focus group discussion, or you can have a semi-structured interview to address these issues. You can go there and observe the people and through a participant observation method. So you can
Sure.
have different methods and modes to understand it.
Sure, ma'am. Yeah, I'll do it.
Adarshji, kindly unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
Hello. Okay, good evening, everybody. Good evening, ma'am. First of all, my apologies for not being able to join on Sunday. I was actually caught up with some work. Um, there was a medical emergency in the family, and things have been a little hectic. But so apparently there was the one-on-one conversation on Sunday, which I missed about the research. So I was just wondering if we could have that time now. The progress on the research paper as of now, I've already submitted the abstract. I would like to know your views, if any, on the abstracts. Uh, then maybe I could tell you where I've reached in the progress. Hello.
Hello, I'm just looking because I
Okay.
don't remember,
Ma'am, Adarshji's abstract is the one without the
on
title.
cure, right? On
Yeah.
cure. I
Yes.
remember seeing it, like that, but I'm looking for the document where I've written my comments, Give me 1 minute, let me. But I could not see. Can you tell me something more about it by the time I'll take it from Priyanka's?
Sure, ma'am.
Please.
So the topic, I've not been able to give a topic yet because it's been quite a while that I've actually been involved in research work, and I feel like I've just lost the researcher vocabulary. So I'll take some more time to read through and come with a topic. I have a rough idea of what the topic's going to be. I just want to have more effective words in the topic. But I can still give I mean, a draft of the topic as of now. So in my abstract, I've mentioned the topic. The topic is basically that I'm trying to aim this research at the juncture where the queer people as a community are being asked to carry forward a social movement which can be then aided with a political and legal um, movement as of such. But the queer community in itself it's basically about how local government can help in can aid in the growth of the queer movement, and how, like, whenever we read even the reports we read, whatever judgments have been coming in the last few years, there's always been what we can interpret from those judgments is that what we see is a lack of a social movement, um, which then could be supported by the courts, or even when, let's say, the issue of marriage, queer marriage has been sent to the parliament, the law saying that um, before the judiciary could take a step, parliament will have to enforce a law, only then will have to put forward the motion. So I want to focus on how local governments can aid the formation and the growth of queer movement in Delhi. I want to base it in Delhi. And for this, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out right now. I'm still outside house. I'm not in the space. But I am thinking I will need a little bit of help in methodology. I'm still reading methodology, trying to come up with the right methodology. But what I've thought about is that I will also have some primary data. I will be taking interviews. I will try to engage with the transgender community and try to interview some transgender people. Then I'm also thinking of approaching NAS Foundation and trying to interview what their work in the sector has been and their journey, try to track it. And so far from what I've read, I'm basically trying to focus whether it's going to be like the difference between a social and political movement. I've tried to study the origin of movements, how movement is formed, and what sort of a movement would this be, a social or a political movement, and what the role of the government is in building better. I've tried reading on, so UN has seemed to be a little helpful. UNHRC, the site of UNHRC, I found a lot of articles on how local governments, how governments should have a role in active role in building better, helping movements, aiding movements. And also I've been um, toying around with the idea of how this queer movement, whether it could be a constitutional movement or an extra constitutional movement, and how for it to be an extra constitutional movement, there are so many barriers that it becomes very difficult for the queer people to uh, be creating an extra constitutional movement. And also, what I've come across is that movements seem to be coming out, when we see historically, they seem to be coming out of pressure zones. And due to the intersectionality in the country, and let's see in Delhi, due to the intersectionality, and that too in metropolitan areas, due to the very curtained intersectionality, there are very strict differences, and biases, taboos still exist, but they exist in a very curtained manner. And all of that has made it even more difficult for a queer movement as such to go ahead. And yeah, thereby I would also have to bring out inherent movements within the queer community, which have stopped historically for such a movement to come together. These are a few things that I've been reading and thinking about.
Yeah. See, I've gone through the abstract right now. One thing that you have to understand that this is only a article that you are going to see, and you have to narrow down the scope, because others, you are going in all the spaces, like you are trying to understand that what is the role of movement, what is the role of an NGO, what is the role of the agency, what is the role of the cure movements, resistances in building that, and how they are kind of networking it, what is the role of state in it. So you can take, maybe I suggest, I don't know what is your background, but one of the methodology that you can take to bring this agency, and then the NGOs, that one that you can take, I can send you this article, which will be very interesting to Professor Hadlal has come to say, that how the whole question about the state, agency and structure. So institutions, agencies and structure. So what are the institutions, what are the agencies, and what are the structure? So trying to look at that, so then there is a structure, like you're saying about an NGO or the LGBTQ structures are there, and then how they're using the agency and what are the institutions who are working in that to understand it. So you are looking at the social structure, you're looking at the institutional framework, and also you're looking at the agency to see that. And so for that, you can use a grounded theory analysis where you can go for an open coding, you can go for an axial coding, and you can come from a thematic coding with a bottom-up approach. So that one of the coding, grounded theory that I can take in one of the classes, where how can you use a coding mechanism or a coding using the grounded theory to bring certain interesting perspectives from the bottom up. Because you are bringing this, this whole question of agency into the structure, which, you can get it. So I can take, like one case study approach with an object subject perspective, like there's a subject in an object, and then subject as the case, and then object as the analytical framework in which the subject is embedded. So I can take that as a framework, and also the grounded theory. I will be taking that and you can understand it. Thank you. So now we have Professor Harilal here. So can we please have an introduction?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I'm delighted to invite Professor K.N. Hariraji. Professor Hariraji is a former member of the Kerala State Planning Board, a former professor at the Center for Development Studies, Kerala, affiliated with JNU, and currently serves the chairperson of the 7th State Finance Commission, Government of Kerala. Sir will be guiding us on the topic Rethinking Local Urban Governance. A very warm welcome and over to you, sir.
Professor Manju and distinguished participants of this program. It's an honor to be invited for taking a class in this program. I'm thankful to the organizers. I'm also sorry that I came late because of some communication problem. I thought my class will be on 9th, and therefore this late coming. Sorry for that. Anyway, now without wasting time, let me get into this presentation. In fact, as all of you know, we had these very important amendments of Indian Constitution, 73rd and 74th amendments, designed to really deepen democracy in the country. These amendments were designed to empower people so that they can have a say in local governance. Here, when we say deepening democracy, it certainly goes beyond elections. Generally, we have elections in a democracy. We make our governments. We elect our governments. But in deepening democracy, the idea is that it should be taken beyond production of governments. People should be having enough avenues, opportunities for continuous involvement in government, in governance, and that's the only way you can really hope to attain the greater goals of democracy. So 73rd and 74th Amendment, these two amendments are very important in the history of democratization of the country. Of course, the amendments by themselves will not ensure democratization, because these amendments will have to be followed by state level reforms, state level legislations. All state governments were supposed to introduce new state level legislations, and state level legislations alone will not be enough. Along with such legislations, there are so many other changes that should come. at the state level, particularly in the form of devolution of resources. There should be significant devolution of resources from the state government, from the center government. And then, of course, now the powers should be devolved. Government assets, government officers, they will have to be redeployed. All these things should follow the constitutional amendments. And we know that our states differ significantly among themselves. There is considerable interstate variation as far as the provisions of state level legislations are concerned. And also considerable variation in the area of devolution of resources. Now, in this presentation of mine, I'll focus on urban local governments because this workshop in general, it's focused on urban local governments. Now, in the area of urban local governments, one major problem that our urban local governments or urban governments face is that of inadequate finances. Now, if the urban local governments are not provided enough resources, if devolution is not enough, then our cities, our urban areas cannot be managed, they cannot develop, and the goal of democratization will be failed. Now, we will not be able to achieve the goal of democratization. People may be able to elect their city governments, they will be able to participate, but they'll be keen to participate only if resources are available. So devolution of resources is very important. There are two aspects to this. First is the power of the local governments to mobilize resources on its own. The local governments, the urban local governments, the municipalities and city corporations, they should have enough powers to mobilize their own resources. They should have enough tax handles so that they can mobilize their own resources. That's one aspect of it. Then, of course, the state governments should devolve enough resources. And then from the part of the center also, there should be considerable devolution of resources so that the cities can finance their development on their own. Here, in fact, now we have a major problem. In fact, now in city governance, in deepening democracy in cities, there are many hurdles. In fact, now in other classes, in other sessions, people might have focused on, or yourself would have discussed other aspects, other shortcomings of our city governance. But I'll focus mainly on the financial aspects. One major problem of the system that we have is this. See, cities and urban areas are, in fact, no growth areas, engines of growth of the country. They are growth poles of the country. Why people tend to concentrate in urban areas? Because they are high growth areas. You have a bunching of industries there. You have ports, airports, and seaports, airports, railway stations, higher education institutions, headquarters of many organizations, corporate firms. So these are areas of high level of economic activity, and they are the areas where we produce a lot of our national income or state income. And these are the areas where maximum employment is also generated. So we should have this idea that these are engines of growth of the economy. These are growth poles of the economy. I mean, the urban areas, the cities, where the density of population is very high, there is high concentration of people, high concentration of institutions, etc. Now, in such areas of high concentration, the demand for services will be so much high. You will need railway lines, fast railway services. You will need roads, better road connectivity, better IT infrastructure. Then you will need drinking water, better drinking water facilities, then waste disposal. All those problems of concentration of people will be there, and these will have to be addressed. And of course, if you want to address these things, you will have to have a very detailed plan for the city. There are different aspects to such plans, such governance. But one critical thing which over determines everything else is availability of finance. So how it will come? One thing is basically the taxing powers of the city governments or the urban areas, municipalities and city by themselves. But unfortunately, however rich the city is, in spite of concentration of rich people or rich corporates in the city governments cannot really mobilize resources from the rich people who inhabit the city. And because the income tax is given to the central government according to the Indian Constitution, personal income tax, corporate income tax, wealth tax, these are all collected by the central government. The city governments cannot tax income, corporate or personal or wealth. And then what are the taxes left with the city governments, whether it is Mumbai or Delhi or other smaller cities or municipalities? Very limited taxing powers are given to the cities by our constitutional arrangement or federal fiscal arrangement. The cities can go for property tax. Cities can collect profession tax. Then practically very limited number of items are given to the city governments or urban governments. Mainly it's property tax and the profession tax. Then relatively lesser varieties of tax. The cities had the entertainment tax in many places, but after the introduction of GST, goods and services taxes in the country, even the entertainment tax was subsumed under the GST. So very limited taxing powers are there with the city governments. But of course, with respect to property taxes, there is scope for improving collection of property taxes. Many cities are not really properly tapping the property taxes as a source. But there are limits to even extending property tax beyond a point. As far as profession tax is concerned, all government employees and private corporate sector employees, they are supposed to give profession tax to the city governments, local governments. But there are upper limits set for this profession tax. And if you want to increase the profession tax, then the constitution will have to be amended. They are the upper limits are set by the constitutional limits. And these upper limits were determined long back. And because of that, profession tax is not a very buoyant source of revenue for the local governments. I'm speaking now about the own tax revenue sources of urban governments. My submission is this: the own tax revenue powers of the Indian cities, Indian urban areas are very, very limited. And then, of course, some fees and user fee, etc. are there. But as a whole, if you examine the own tax and resources mobilization powers of Indian cities are very, very limited compared to the task given to them of maintaining local roads, maintaining drinking water facilities, sanitation, etc., etc. The city governments are supposed to provide all these public services, but the resource base given to them is very limited. Then what is left? The other two sources are devolution from the state governments and devolution from the central government. Here again, the city governments or urban areas are not favorably treated by the Indian fiscal system. And this should be examined in detail so that in the long run, there are solutions suggested by scholars, and there should be this awareness that Indian cities, where people tend to concentrate, where economic productions tend to concentrate, should be adequately financed. But now they are very badly, inadequately financed. Now, this is a problem that the Indian state generally faces, which should be addressed for the development process to continue, for democracy to be strengthened, for successfully deepening democracy. Let me take you to the other side of the coin. I've examined now in some detail about the taxation powers given to the local governments, city local governments particularly. But what about devolution from higher tiers of government? We have the Central Finance Commission, which make recommendations regarding the devolution of the tax revenue of the central government to the state governments and then to the local governments. Now, one problem with the Indian fiscal system is this, that unlike in developed countries, the Indian state is not growing. The size of the Indian state, the revenue of the Indian state or expenditure of the Indian state collectively, that is, the Indian states, state governments and Indian central government put together, the size of the government is not really growing fast. Now, if you take the case of developed countries, OECD countries, for example, if you take OECD countries, the size of the OECD states, government revenue and government expenditure as a proportion of GDP, if you take, their governments were growing like anything. Last 150 years, if you have, you have OECD data is available, you can see that the size of the state has been growing. If you take the current data for this year or previous year or 1 or 2 years back, see, most of the OECD countries are having states as big as 40%, 45%, 50% of the GDP. That is, the revenue of the government is as big as 45% or 50% of the GDP of the nation. The expenditure of the state, USA, government in USA, government in UK, in Germany, in France, Netherlands, in all these OECD countries, the government expenditure, state expenditure will be around 40 to 50% of the GDP. That means the government is very big in most of these countries. That is true of China. That is true of many developing countries which are doing well. What about India? India is not collecting enough taxes. India is not collecting, making enough revenue. And we are not spending much in the sense as a proportion of GDP. If you take the post-independence period, the the expenditure of the Indian state, the collective state of India, was growing in the initial decades after after independence, and by around up to late 1980s, the size of the Indian state was growing. But once we went into neoliberal policies, after the neoliberal turn in 1990, the size of the state has tended to stagnate by around 25%. It was not really growing beyond a certain point because, in fact, no international agencies, IMF, World Bank, and many other agencies advised the global South against the size of the state growing, because we know that there is this impression that small is beautiful, and the state should grow small. The government should limit its role to law and order and related things, and it should leave everything to the market, and market will take care. This is the idea. This is the philosophy perpetrated, popularized by international agencies. Somehow some of the developing countries got interested in this philosophy, and India also tried to sort of limit the size of the state. The question is, what should be the size of the government in a developing country which is growing? At different stages of development, at higher stages of development, you actually require higher size government. That has been the experience of China, that has been the experience of developed countries. But in India, the size of the state has not been growing as fast as in other countries. In most of these developed countries and successful developing countries, the state expenditure play a very important role in development of infrastructure, roads, railway. For example, China, in terms of infrastructure, China was almost the same as India, say 50, 60 years ago. Whereas after that, last 20, 25 years, China had such major progress. Now, the economy completely got transformed, primarily through state intervention. In fact, this was the story of most of the developed countries also, because the state had played a very important role in developing all this infrastructure, capital expenditure government did, and in fact, the private corporate sector, private economy, in fact, responded to this. There was a kind of crowding in effect from the private sector. It was not crowding out. So when the government invests in railway, when the government invests in airports, in other areas, infrastructure and all, then that will tend to encourage private capital. That's what happened in developed countries, but somehow in India, the size of the government was not keeping pace with development, because now we got into this idea that smaller the government, that's the better, and government should not get into business, etc. It's true that government should not be inefficient. Government should not promote inefficient private sector, but government should play a very important role and very efficient role. But in India, the size of the government was not keeping pace with development. I'm saying this to again come back and focus on urban governments. See, the size of the government was not keeping pace with the development at the aggregate level. Then what about at the state level? See, in the case of India's devolution, if you take the history of India's financial devolution, that is the federal fiscal arrangement, the central government, in fact, through finance commissions, tend to give more money to backward areas for the purpose of equity, which is a welcome thing. But in the process, wherever the per capita income is high, in states where per capita income is high, the devolution is much less. A smaller and smaller proportion of income go to states with higher per capita income. No, that is wherever growth is high, wherever per capita income is high, the central devolution will be less. Then the other thing is state governments' right to mobilize resources. Again, the state governments are not having the powers to tax the elite, the rich. Income tax, state government cannot tax. Corporate income tax, they cannot mobilize. So if the state is rich, if the state is improving its per capita income, devolution will be less, and its own effort to mobilize taxes will be less. So the size of the state, size of the government, state government, tend to be negatively related to per capita income. That's an unfortunate situation that we see in India. And therefore, see this front-running states with high per capita income tend to have lower government expenditure, which adversely affect the growth poles of the economy, growth regions of the economy. This is an unfortunate situation. Like Tamil Nadu is doing well. It's having a high per capita income. But then the devolution of resources from the central government is less, and their own ability to tax is also less. So Tamil Nadu cannot keep pace with the development it is achieving. This is true of Karnataka. This is true of some other developed states in north, and this is also true of Kerala. Now again, then you come to cities. Cities are growth poles where people tend to concentrate, industries tend to concentrate, high level of production is taking place. And because of such high concentration of people in cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, or smaller cities like Kochi, Thiruvananthapuram, and Indore, any city for that matter. See, Indian cities are not having enough money to keep the city clean. And Indian cities are stinking. Indian cities are known for very low level of sanitation services. And urban governments are failing. Urban governments are failing in providing safe drinking water. In the area of power, in the area of drinking water, in the area of waste disposal, in the area of sanitation, in the area of water quality, air quality, Indian cities are failing. And road infrastructure, traffic management. So Indian cities, which are the growth centers of India, are having a major problem in financing its development. Now, this is happening in the name of equity. Because the per capita income in cities are high, or such states are high, so you tend to give less money from the center to them by way of devolution. That is okay, because for backward regions, we should give more money. But then these cities, these advanced states should be allowed to tax or mobilize resources from the rich corporates, rich individuals, or there should be some other mechanism for mobilizing resources. Take, for example, profession tax. Profession tax, why should there be an upper limit like this? There should be constitutional amendment so that the cities can mobilize more profession tax from the city dwellers who are having professional income. But that space is not given. This affects adversely the ability to mobilize resources. So it, in fact, adversely, very seriously adversely affect development process of the country, because wherever growth is there, wherever per capita income is high, wherever population growth is taking place, wherever development is concentrating, there the ability of the state, ability of the government to support that process of growth is severely constrained because of the fiscal federal arrangement of the country. This is what I have seen from my research. I've seen the data from OECD for the last more than 100 years, and most of the developing countries, Indian figures, and then states as well as the local governments. Now, the local governments, it's a big challenge for the local governments to mobilize resources on their own. There should be constitutional changes, there should be legislative changes at the level of states to help local government mobilize resources. And then, of course, there should be some mechanism for devolving more money from the union government as well as the state government to the local government, so that they can cater to the process of development. They can cater to the urban issues. So basically, I was trying to focus on urban development, urban democracy. Now, if you want to really democratize urban government, one major condition is that they have adequate resources. If they have adequate resources, then the urban population, the citizens of the urban areas, they can come together, collectively plan things. But the first thing is to ensure that there are enough resources at the local level. Earlier, we had octroi, such taxes were there, they were all removed. And state government, the local governments are also not able to really tap the market by issuing shares and also, etc. Their borrowing capacity is also severely constrained. Now, of course, there are other things like whether the urban governments are having the expertise for local level planning. If they don't have the expertise within the urban governments, how to tap the resources, human resources available in the locality. In every urban area, you have people residing in area who are really technically very sound, knowledge-wise, they can help the city government. Whether we have the mechanism to tap the such potential which are available in the city. There, you should have a system of local governance where the participation of people in governance is ensured. Participation of people, informed governments, informed people in local level planning, city planning, that should be ensured. Institutions should be there. And there should be mechanism to involve people. You have certain kind of provisions made in the legislations, but then you should ensure that people participate in ward committees or in the rural governments. It's basically Grama Sabhas. There are alternative avenues available in the urban areas for participation, but many of them remain in the paper. In Kerala, there is considerable improvement. There are some other states also which try to sort of involve the local people, the urban citizens of the local government in the process of making the plan, in the process of planning for development. Now, in this context, the urban master plans, etc., become very important. I heard that there are engineers and architects participating in this workshop. In that context, it's very important to think about urban development plans also, there, in fact, no, the cities should be planning ahead. I mean, not only for the current period, but for years to come, for the next 25 years or 50 years, which are the areas where where the city has the potential to grow, potential to develop, and on the basis of the assessment about potential for the future, there should be plans made for achieving those potentials. In this, the most of the Indian urban governments are poorly equipped in terms of manpower, for doing such planning. But then it's also true that in most of the cities you have inhabitants of the city, qualified people are there whose knowledge can be tapped for making long-term plans for the city. That's where the institutions play a very, very important role. And the political parties, society in general, community level organizations, etc., can in fact help the local governments make such small area and comprehensive urban development plans. But these are things that should be strengthened over time. The 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments were designed to provide the background, but it's taking time. Now the whole thing should have progressed much faster. I'll conclude by saying that that in Kerala, the government is taking some efforts to improve local governance in general. That is true of cities also. But one major problem even now remaining is urban finance. Urban finance plus everything else, which are really required for local planning, local level planning, local level governance. That should be ensured in place. And in fact, there is a long distance to really cover. It's not an easy task, but if we come together and demand for these things, then it should happen. That's what I'm trying to say in this short kind of presentation. And if you have questions, then we can certainly discuss.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank
providing
you.
such a comprehensive and enlightening session. Now, I would like to welcome the chair for her kind remarks on the session. And in the meanwhile, participant can either use a raise hand feature on Zoom or start putting question in the Q&A box or chat box. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Harilal. Very interesting session, especially one of the most important and needed discussion where in the context of we are discussing about urban local governance. When we are discussing about urban local governance, it is important to see beyond government and to look at the questions of governance. And especially in the context of the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, where he is focused more on the 74th Amendment and to see this transition from the government to governance and what are the challenges the urban governance is facing, especially when we are designing the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, where we think the local self-governance institutions are the agents of local democracy for deepening democracy, whether we are able to translate that philosophical ideas into practices, and what are the challenges when we institutionalize this deepening democracy and the institutions of local self-governance as agents, where this whole question, when we are saying about democratic decentralization, we are speaking about decentralization, we are speaking about delegation. But Professor Harilal was speaking about one of the much important thing, that the devolution, and especially the financial devolution, and how it is important for the local governance to take its power to have the financial devolution from the state and the center, and how it is different and difficult for a space like a physical federal arrangement that is existing, and how And he was saying the example of the OECD countries and saying that how a growing state is important in democratizing these interventions. If you provided the financial devolution, and how that is not happening in a state like India, where the highly performing state has been constrained with the financial devolution and with the state and center state physical arrangement that is happening, and how it is constraining, and also with the context of the neoliberal governance, the state that governs the least becomes the becomes the best state, and the small state becoming beautiful, and where the state is actually moving away from the welfaristic notions. And then that is what the international agencies are suggesting, and what are the kind of challenges and issues that is contributing to the democratization of the process, especially to the growing state as far as the finance is concerned. And he also explained about the ways in which the Kerala, Tamil Nadu places are facing the challenges, especially as a place which is a high performance, and then the importance of the local governance to mobilize its own resources to taxations, and especially to the taxing the rich. We're saying about the professional tax and how it is important. This mobilization of the resources is very important when we're thinking about the financial devolution. So very important points and very relevant points, and especially as the chairperson of the State Finance Commission, which looks into this very important questions philosophically, ideologically, operationally. You have one of the most important resource person before you to ask questions who can answer your doubts regarding the financial devolution, one of the most imperative questions for the urban local governance. Students, participants, please take the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to open the floor for Q&A session. Once again, participant can either use raise hand feature of the Zoom or type the question in the Q&A box or chat box.
Questions?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for the talk,
Manjula.
Professor. Thank you for the talk, Professor. I just wanted to know how can we make the utilization of funds in urban local bodies more transparent and essentially so that people are more ready to actively contribute to urban development.
Shall I collect more questions and respond? Hello?
So we can go ahead with this one.
Okay. It's an interesting question. In fact, the financial administration of the country is not very transparent, not only at the local governments, at the level of state governments, and at the level of central government also. Things are opaque and not very transparent. It's very important that financial administration is made more transparent. That point that you made is very well appreciated. Of course, you have budget and budget documents, budget discussions coming at the level of the union government, at the level of the state government also. So you have some idea about the way central government or state government mobilize resources and how they allocate the financial resources for various competing goals, ends, and also for across areas and all. Some ideas that you'll get from the budget and budget discussions. But these are at the aggregate level. Specifically, in fact, no, details are not available. And then there is another problem. In fact, you generally discuss budget. That's about the expectations regarding how much money can be mobilized, how much money will be spent in different areas. But what actually happens, whether the budget targets are attained as far as resource mobilization is concerned, or whether expenditure targets are realized. No, this is not in the public domain. It's not discussed properly. Only academicians or researchers go after this data and then try to get the data. That too, after many years. Concurrently, it's impossible to get data on expenditure and all. That's a major problem. And this problem can be seen at the local level also. But it's possible these days, because of advancement of technology, to make things more transparent. And as you rightly told, if it can be made transparent, people will have incentive to pay more. In fact, the urban residents in general, they complain about lack of services offered by urban governments. A lot of social media discussion or newspaper media discussions will be there on poor services offered by Indian cities. And some of our people who go abroad, they see the clean and neat cities abroad and come back and then start complaining about our cities, stinking cities of India. But we don't, in fact, raise the question what you give to the government in terms of tax, in terms of contribution, how much you give to the city governments, how much anybody gives to the city government, whether corporates, like Hyderabad, for example, it's a big city of India, and you have all the corporates working from them there. And they may be taking a lot of services from the city, each of them. In fact, rich people or rich corporates, they avail more services from the city, but how much they contribute to the city in terms of resources? Now, that kind of assessment is not there. That question is not asked by the citizens. And in fact, there should be a mechanism by which people are made aware of what they give and what they get. It's important to speak about what you get, about the quality of services that you get, and we should insist on better services. But at the same time, we should also find out where are we paying taxes, whether where the taxes go, and whether we really pay significantly, or from what we pay, whether significant amount is going to the city governments for cleaning, for ensuring better air quality or water quality, etc., etc. That's my response to the first question. I don't know. I think I've answered your question. I'll take more questions.
Yes, sir. There is one question in the chat box by Sonamji. Sonamji,
Can you please read out, because now from here I think it's
Okay, sir. Sonamji, would you like to please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I can. Sir, first of all, thank you for talking about this topic. So, I had one question. If the public revenue is not generated by the community, so in the phase where budget is decided, at that time, how means in Mumbai, some areas people water tax, they are not able to pay water tax, but during finalization of budget, how can it will cover or anything will be done?
you're speaking about the enforcement of taxing powers of the city government. There are different ways of ensuring that people are paying their tax, but again, in some areas it will be difficult because people are poor, and there should be proper concessions given to people who are not really able to pay. In fact, that's the problem. That's a problem, no? In a city, people really availing, a rich corporate house with so many shops or so many factories or so many other establishments, they take away a lot from the city, and a slum dweller. In fact, in terms of contribution to the city, in the form of taxes. I mean, that's very little from the big people also. Now, because the income tax and corporate income tax is collected by the central government. I'm not saying that the rich people are not paying taxes, but most of their taxes go to the central government in the form of income tax or corporate income tax. But your Mumbai city as such, how much they are able to collect? That's the problem. I mean, these are the kind of things that the Indian planners or Indian political leadership or city dwellers should be thinking about. Because now we should insist, it's very important that the city government provide very good services. City should be clean. Our cities are in a very bad shape. That's not good for health. That's not good for our growth. But to improve the city services, one very important precondition is enough resources. City should be able to mobilize resources. Of course, the availability of resources alone is not enough. You should be able to use the resources properly. Administrative arrangement, planning, all those components should be made efficient. But no, you should also speak about resources availability.
Bharathy ji, would you like to please unmute yourself and ask the question? Bharathy ji?
Hello, am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Hello, sir. Thank you for your insightful knowledge into the physical conditions of ULP. So my question is, I'll just read out what I've written. From your experience, do you think increase in service tax alone for basic amenities like water supply, solid waste management, and others would give and increase the efficiency of service delivery by the ULPs? That is my first question. Can I also ask the second one, or would you like to?
No, you please ask the second one also.
Okay, so so through your experience, there will be land asset ownership by the ULPs themselves. So are these ULPs efficiently utilizing these lands that they have for revenue generation, and if not, what do they lack in achieving this?
Yeah. In fact, now the service tax. Now there are constitutional and legislative limits on the local governments, city governments to charge service tax. Because now, in fact, most of the services are taxed by the GST system, and the local governments cannot really, levy services tax given the fiscal structure of the country now. But you may be thinking about the user fee, which can be charged by the local governments. And I do agree that the city governments can tap more resources through services. I mean the user fees in many areas, and I do think that the city governments are not really reaching the potential, and there is considerable scope for using the available potential of mobilizing resources through user fees. And the second point, can you please repeat the second aspect of it?
There is land ownership by the ULPs that, in your experience, have you seen the ULPs effectively utilizing and making the land ownership or turning it into some kind of a market for revenue generation? And if not, what is that they lack in it?
Yeah, there are, in fact, most city governments are owning land, owning other assets which can be a source of revenue for city governments. In fact, no, how effectively they use their own land or their own buildings and other assets they are having. It varies from one city to another. In most cases, again, as I told in the case of the other thing, most cities are not really tapping the potential. For example, if they have buildings, the the rent fixed for such buildings of the city governments, they may be very outdated. The rent, were fixed long back, and they are not being periodically revised, etc. So there is considerable scope for improving revenue from owned land and owned assets. Then, of course, the property tax, of course, that's one way of mobilizing more resources. Again, most of our city governments, in fact, they are not using the full potential. The potential that is used is very less in the case of many cities. Now, in fact, there is growing awareness among the local governments that they should mobilize property tax, and the central government is also insisting on mobilizing more property tax. In fact, the Finance Commission award insists on improving revenue from property tax. If that is not done, city governments will not be given the Finance Commission grant earmarked for them. So there is some push, some pressure to improve the property tax revenue. That's happening. But again, there are other possibilities of using the land for mobilizing more resources. But again, there should be proper institutional development to do all that. Improvement in administration is really required in those directions.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yeah.
I have a question that what has been the experience of much high municipal bonds for city finances?
Municipal bonds, yeah. Again, this is a major avenue, but there are cities which use municipal bonds. But as far as my experience is concerned in Kerala, this option is there, but the city governments have not been able to really tap this particular source in any significant way. Again, if the city governments are to mobilize by issuing bonds, then their tax base should be sufficiently healthy, because the investors will look at those things also. Their balance sheet, how they mobilize resources. The investors will be looking at those things also before buying the municipal bonds. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Any participants have any questions? So thank you, sir. It was pleasure listening to you, and we hope to collaborate with you in future IMPRI events as well. So with this, we come to end of today's session, and as we come to end of day 6 of Urban Policy and Local Government's Youth Fellowship, an online national autumn and winter school program, a 4-month online immersive introductory leadership certificate training fellowship. I, Sana Ansari, researcher at IMPRI.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for this 1
Before
hour,
that,
and thank you for your questions.
And I also like to invite Chair for her closing remarks before the final vote of thanks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Harilal, for a very interesting session, especially looking at the financial aspects of the urban local governance, and a very engaged question answer session after that. And participants really gained a lot of insightful understanding about the financial delegation and the devolution and the relevance and importance of that for improving the urban local governance in a systematic and a more resourceful manner. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the class. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. So with this, we come to end of today's session.
Sorry, Sana, sorry to interrupt. Ma'am, Ashish ji had a question regarding his research. He couldn't ask earlier. If Ashish ji, if you're still here, you can ask.
It's already 8:30.
Very
I
sorry,
have to
ma'am.
leave.
Just this
I
one.
have a meeting at 8:30. Actually, I'm running behind that.
I
Ashish,
can
can
ask
we
you
have
later
this-
on. I can ask you later
Yeah.
on. I'll contact you later.
Ne-
Priyanka,
Yeah,
WhatsApp.
you can take the question later because I have a pre-scheduled meeting at 8:30 where I'm running late for that.
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Thank you so
Not an
much.
issue. Yes.
Thank
Adarsh ji, yours also will take later then.
Thank you.
WhatsApp group में ले लेंगे.
So as we come to end of day 6 of Urban Policy and Local Governments Youth Fellowship, an online national autumn and winter school program, a 4-month online immersive introductory leadership certificate training fellowship program, I, Sana Ansari, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for the day 6, Professor Tara Nair ji and K.N. Hariralji, and our chair, Manjula Bharathy ji. They're taking out their valuable time and allowing us to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised important questions and actively participate in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you on November 14 of day 7 of the certificate course by distinguished expert Dr. Praveen Kumar ji and Professor Anita Bhideji. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on various podcasts or reading our publication. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing a very good day and thank you.